This is Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm here today for my weekly live cast where I share Stonemaier Games news, discuss random topics, mostly game related, and answer your questions if you have any questions. Now I'll jump right to the chase. This morning I did a little bit of a surprise reveal because kind of two things associated here. One, we have moved our next e-newsletter back to September 7th. So really forward to September 7th. Moved it forward 1 week. And in doing so, it means that there are 2 more weeks before we reveal a new Wingspan Asia card. And so I decided, why not do one today? Especially since this card, the Bee Eater, is a card for which I have the art. Natalia and Anna always kindly, very graciously and kindly, send me an original illustration for each expansion. And they sent us the green Bee Eater. So I have this on my wall, and it's fairly likely that I was going to accidentally spoil this anyway by sharing a photo out of context on Instagram at some point of my wall. So yeah, we have this bird on our wall right now, and I shared it on the Wingspan Facebook group and in the Stonemaier Games Discord today. So this is the green Bee Eater. If you're listening instead of watching, the ability is when activated, if there is at least one bird on the tray, on the bird tray, that has an invertebrate in its food cost, tuck one of them behind this bird, which makes perfect thematic sense for a bee-eating bird. Yeah, that is the green Bee Eater preview card for Wingspan Asia. I have 2 questions that were asked in advance of this video by people who aren't on Facebook but watch this later on YouTube. So I thought I'd answer those questions first. The first one came just today from Nicholas. He said, what do I think about self-restricting handicaps in games? So if you know that you are maybe a really good player at a certain game, or at least an experienced player at a game, and you're introducing a newer player, for example, are there any games or any ways that players handicap themselves to make the experience better or more balanced, I would say, for the experience versus the new player? And I would say, like on a soft basis, I find myself doing this in games. Like if I'm teaching a game to someone, I might try. I'm still trying to win, but I might try. I might find some what do they call it? Intrinsic rewards in the game. Like I might try to do something a little bit zany that I think might be fun, and will it win or not, I don't really know. So that's kind of a way of handicapping myself a little bit. Also, one game I thought of that has an element like this, a competitive game in particular, is the game Nations. Nations has a really clever built-in handicapping system where you can decide basically how punishing you want the game to be for you. And there are greater rewards, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, for the more punishing, more difficult levels. But it also gives you the option related to income, I believe, in the game of how unpunishing the game can be. I really like that in Nations. I think that's a really, really clever aspect of the game. One other question in advance, and then I'll get to Carlos's question. Carlos has a question in the comments here. So Ryan asked 2 questions. If I could talk about the process of creating miniatures and how many games do I play per week? Per week, I usually play games. I mean, it depends a little bit on the week. Let's see. Usually play around 3 or 4 published games a week. Yeah, I'd say 3 or 4 published games is about right. I usually we host a game night on Wednesday, and that game night is either virtual or in person every other week. And virtual games we play a little faster, and so we often play more games on virtual game night than normal game night. But like a game night last week, my in-person game night, we played 3 games. We played the Guild of Merchant Explorers, we played Cat in the Box, and we played Gudetama. Oftentimes I'll play a game with Megan on the weekend, maybe a game or 2. This past weekend we played Marvel Dice Throne. We played our finale matchup, which was awesome to play. We've been doing like a little mini tournament there, and we had the finale of Black Widow versus Loki, and Loki won. Megan was playing as Loki, and we also played Land versus Sea last night. So sometimes we mix in various games. I have a friend that has a game night every Tuesday. We attend usually that game night every other week. So yeah, I would say 3 to 4 games a week on average, maybe a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. It really varies. The process of creating minis is, I'll say the very distilled version, which is that I have an artist create a sketch of what I want the miniature to look like. I go to our miniature sculptor, a 3D modeler, a guy named Heriberto in Mexico who does a wonderful job with sculpts. And he does a 3D digital sculpt of it. And we send that to our manufacturer, Panda, and Panda creates a sample of it, kind of a 3D printed version of it, to make sure that it can work and that it'll be durable, that the details are clear and apparent. And then we iterate on that in small ways until we're satisfied with the final version. Then Panda gets approval for me to make a mold, because the mold is the expensive sunk cost for them to make. They make a mold of that miniature, and then we mass produce it whenever we're ready to make the game. That's a short version answer of it. I'm happy to answer more questions about that if you have them in the comments on YouTube, because I know I don't think you're watching this live. Carlos says, YouTube recently recommended that I watch your video, A Brief History of Stonemaier Games. It's always a great watch, but have you considered creating an updated version of Stonemaier Games' 10th anniversary? That's a great question, Carlos. And actually, just yesterday, I filmed an updated video to A Brief History of Stonemaier Games. I ended that last video in August of 2019. And so the video I filmed yesterday was from August of 2019 to currently August of 2022. So that video will air sometime during the month of our anniversary month. I think probably the second weekend of September is what I'm aiming for right now. But yeah, you predicted something that I did yesterday, somewhat in secret. But yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing what the last 3 years look like in video format. My video this past weekend, what did we do? Oh, this past week was a special one. This is the video where Susanna, my coworker, our retail relationship manager, joined me for her top 10 list, and she joined me in person, and we kind of just went through her top 10 list, and she told some wonderful stories about how she came to love each of the 10 games on her list. It's a really great video. The feedback on it has been really wonderful. Makes me want to have Susanna back for another video in the future. She's a really warm person, and you can tell how much she loves games. But feel free to check out that video from this past Sunday. The blog post I did this past week, one was on card sleeves. Had a great discussion about card sleeves with people who both love to sleeve and people who don't love to sleeve, and seeing how people who are in one of those camps view statistics about those two categories differently. Really interesting to see that glimpse into human nature there. And so I have updated that blog post just yesterday. Updated it with a new chart compiling all the ambassador data that I had gathered, plus the data, the public data on the blog. And there's a big difference between those two. In the original post, I believe only 3% of our ambassadors say that they sleeve all of their games. They put card sleeves on all their games. Whereas the public version of it, I believe it was 16% of people say that they sleeve every card in all of their games, which seems like a lot of sleeves, a lot of cards, a lot of plastic, but I understand why some people might want to do that. And the last post I did, on Monday, not yesterday, I did a post about the creative process and how, as related a little bit to the new Game of Thrones show and George R.R. Martin, and how the creative process can be impeded a little bit if you reveal something too early for various external factors. So how external factors can impact the creative process. It can make you either less or more excited about moving forward. How it can also kind of sometimes augment ideas that you have, but also if the design of whatever you're making is still in flux, those external pressures can have a negative impact on that as well. A little spin-off of that, did anyone else watch the new Game of Thrones through? What is the name? The House of the Dragon. We watched it last night, and I was pleasantly surprised. Like it is dark in many ways. That isn't why I'm drawn to the show, but it was interesting to me to see that events from this fake world's history, this fictional world's history, that conclude in a big way in a show that we've already seen, are still really interesting. Like the dynamics of the people in this show that I probably could know exactly what their futures are, but I don't want to know yet. I found it very entertaining and very intriguing to see what happens next, and the characters in particular are really, really interesting. Curious what you think if you saw the premiere. Isaac said, "How did I enjoy the Gamers Ranch?" And I might have accidentally skipped ahead a little bit there, but Isaac, I'll answer your question. I really love the Gamers Ranch. The Gamers Ranch is it's essentially a vacation property for around 20 people in the middle of Missouri that a very passionate gamer named David created. It's a giant building, a massive building, and really a giant property around that with a 18-hole disc golf course. And David has filled it with so many different games and gaming adjacent things. Like there are video games and pinball machines, but a lot of tabletop games and a lot of space to play them. And I loved it. Isaac, have you been there? I think we may have talked about this a little bit, but yeah, I highly recommend it to anyone maybe within a 4 to 5 hour driving range of the middle of Missouri. I would highly recommend this place for a long weekend maybe. Chad says, okay, we're talking about how games offer players handicaps if they want them, optional or mandated. And the example Chad gives here is the chain system in Keyforge, where you take a number of rounds with one fewer card in your hand based on how powerful that deck happens to be. That's a great example, Chad. And that one, it has a neat form of metadata where the Keyforge system collected a ton of data to determine which decks are more powerful or less powerful. And I think maybe you can do it on a micro level too, just based on how often a deck is winning, if you want to keep track of that. Betsy says, how does your brainstorming start on day one? Sorry, Facebook scrolled past your question, Betsy. Day one of designing a new game. Day one of designing any new game is just pencil and paper. Just pull out a pencil, pull out a paper, and just brainstorm ideas, themes and mechanisms mixed together. I like that organic surface. I like kind of turning off the computer when I do that initial brainstorming and just thinking about things. And oftentimes that brainstorming will lead to some research too. I might go watch some videos about related mechanisms or related themes, other related games, or other related topics outside of the gaming world. But yeah, pencil and paper, day one is just a piece of pencil and paper. And usually I kind of let it sit like that. I usually then sleep on it, let it sit for a week before I really dive in deeper or see if I am excited enough to dive in any deeper. What about you, Betsy? What is your day one brainstorming process? What does that look like for you? Molly says that she loved the video with Susanna. Definitely would be happy to see her back on. Thanks, Molly. Yeah, I floated an idea to Susanna to have her return to a video someday. A video a little bit more related to what she does for Stonemaier Games, but I think it would still be fun to have her back. Tony has a story about Dominion here. He says, last night our group played Dominion, and one player decided to use every buy phase to keep buying silver cards instead of any of the other various cards in the supply. His intention was obviously to gain a lot of buying power very quickly and then purchase all the province cards and win. I'm happy to say this strategy failed, but it made me wonder about breaking a game during testing. How difficult is it to test a game you're designing against different angles a player might take to break it? Do you specifically ask testers to try and find ways around the usual gameplay? Yeah, Tony, this is a great question about playtesting because sometimes, for some playtesters, it is always their instinct to break the game. And I've even run into playtesters who they can't seem to break out of that mold. Like they'll break the game over 3 playtests. They'll break the game the exact same way on each game. And so I've taken to adding a little note in my blind playtesting request, kind of the details that I send to lead blind playtesters, to say if you break the game or if any player breaks the game, don't do it again. Like note it, definitely tell me, but it will potentially ruin the remaining playtest if you always just play that way. We had this happen in particular in Charterstone, where playtesters were playing 13 games of Charterstone, which is a lot, but we had some playtesters that could not break the game the same way. And I was like, hey, I would get these reports and I'd be like, why did you do this? Why did you do this 5 games in a row? Like, we got it the first time. You kind of just wasted the next 4 playtests by doing this because we already know that it's broken. Just ignore that part of it. Take that card out of the game, and then we'll fix it when I get the reports. The reverse side of this is, yes, there are times where I specifically tell players. In fact, throughout any playtest, I want people to to push the boundaries, to figure out where those boundaries are and push them and let me know so I can fix them. But in particular, that happens late in the process of blind playtesting, where like I have a project right now where I specifically ask playtesters to identify cards and abilities that they think are breaking the game and to let me know about them. So I'm very specifically asking them about that. Chad says, I've recently played a few ancient games like the Royal Game of Senet, and Henfatul, a Viking chess. He says, I really enjoyed the Royal Game of which is over 5,000 years old and is the oldest complete with rules game. It's a fun, short racing game. Highly recommended. I need to try that. Senet was a very frustrating take that game. Have I played any of these? What are your thoughts? I don't think I played any of them. As a child, though, we did have a book that included basic tokens and a lot of different games in the book. And Senet sounds a little bit familiar. I wonder if Senet was in this book of games that we played, but I don't remember it if it was. Looks like my fellow publisher and designer friend Frank is popping in. Hey, Frank. Good to see you. I continue to enjoy your blog posts. Frank did a blog post just the other day on his City of Games website about, trying to think of what the recent post was, because Frank posts a lot, but I believe this one was about the web store, the evolution of Frank's web store, and he gives some great tips about Shopify, even just the most basic form of Shopify on that blog post. Charles says, great news on the eco changes for Wingspan. Are all the new games in the pipeline going to be eco-friendly now? Yes. Well, this is the tough part, Charles. So we are definitely, like, we have certain components that we are using and will never not use again. So like wooden tokens over plastic. Definitely, we're using wooden tokens from now on, and those wooden tokens will be FSC certified, so they'll be from forests that are sustainably forested. We will try, when possible, to use pulp cardboard inserts or trays, but sometimes it just won't be possible to do that. Like with the Libertalia tray, it is not impossible that we could have done that with the Libertalia tray, but I don't think it would have worked all that well, to be honest. And the expense, it would have added a significant expense to every copy of Libertalia if we'd done that. So we have to gauge the value of doing something environmentally friendly versus the utility and value that we offer to customers based on that type of component. We are only using the biodegradable plastic bags moving forward, and we're still looking for a shrink wrap solution. Panda is working on that. The other thing that I'm thinking of, though, we don't have a lot of games with miniatures, but if we have a game where we think miniatures significantly add to the experience, we're going to make miniatures. We're going to put miniatures in these games, and so far there isn't really a eco-friendly way of making a beautiful miniature. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis where it is the overall goal, but depending on the game, we're going to try to provide the best experience for players. And that might sometimes mean a less eco-friendly component paired with other eco-friendly components. Garrett says, do I have any more fun travel plans this year? What do we have planned for this year? There is a little kind of a weekend-long event that some friends are hosting. It's at a cabin type event, kind of like a Gamers Ranch type cabin, but it's essentially a mini convention run by friends and with people who know each other. So we have that coming up, and I think that's the only thing that I can think of that we have coming up. Not a lot of big travel plans for the rest of the year. What about any of you? Now that summer's ending, do you have any trips to beautiful fall or autumn places? Or if you're on the bottom half of the world, any places that are turning spring in the near future? What else do we have going on? I have very rarely eaten out at a restaurant during the pandemic. We've ordered a lot of food in from restaurants, but we haven't eaten out at restaurants very often at all. And really the only few times we've done it were in Alaska, where we didn't have much of a choice, and restaurants that offer patio dining. And so we found out that a pretty fancy restaurant that we only go to a few times a year called Indo in St. Louis does have a really nice patio. And it was we went there with some friends on Sunday, and it was a really nice reminder to me of how big of a difference it is when you get the food served to you very fresh on an actual, like, plated on a plate, especially at a fancy restaurant, compared to in a to-go container. I kind of get why there are increasing number of fancy restaurants in the area that, again, we only go to every now and then, but I hear about a great restaurant and I want to try it, that don't offer to-go dining anymore, because I think for that reason, they can't provide the food experience that they're wanting to provide. So if you check out my Instagram photos from, I think I posted it on Monday, you can see some really beautiful photos of food. And it was just a great reminder to me that I need to maybe, if I am excited about trying a restaurant, that hopefully they have an outdoor dining option, because I always wear a mask indoors in public spaces. And so that makes eating very difficult. But yeah, so I need to keep that in mind when I'm looking at restaurants. I want to try a few more patios in St. Louis and try what types of food they have to offer there. Because Indo was very, very delicious. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a fancy meal in St. Louis sometime in the future. Did a few podcast recordings recently. I did one with Dusty of The Mill. I don't know when that one's going live, but we had a little chat that will go up on his on the Mill's YouTube channel in the near future. And I had a chat with the Mental Mages podcast, I think a week or so ago, but I believe it just went live today. That's the Mental Mages podcast. I also have a podcast recording today, but I forget the name of the podcasters. I don't have it Don't have it handy over here. Um, Scrolling through looking for questions here. Aramis says, along with Stonemaier Games, Clink and Dune Imperium are some of our favorite games. I love Clink and Dune Imperium. Have you thought about working with Paul Dennen on a future game? I would love to work with Paul at some point. I think Paul's. Those are two of my top 10 favorite games right now, and they're both from Paul. So I think that would be really, really cool to work with Paul. At the same time, I like giving newer designers an opportunity to kind of get into the business with a great design. I don't think Paul needs that in anymore at all. He could get a game published from any publisher. But if, yeah, Paul reached out with me with an awesome game that fits Stonemaier Games' guidelines, I would definitely look at it at the very least and definitely get excited about it. But he might only work for Dire Wolf Studios at this point. I've only seen Dire Wolf publish this game, so I don't know if he's actually pitching to other publishers at this point. The Excel Gamer says, what is a game that you thought was going to be hard to learn but ended up being easy? Flipside is a game he has a Flipside question. A game that I thought was going to be hard to learn but ended up being easy. Ooh, it's a tough question to answer on the fly. I really like that question, but a tough one to answer on the fly. One that kind of comes to mind is Anno 1800. I remember being a little daunted by the sheer number of options in the game, but I think the game distills it down in a pretty streamlined way. And then the other way, a game that I thought was going to be easy to learn but was difficult or frustrating. I can't think of a specific example for that, but there are definitely games that on the surface appear very simple, but there are so many little things that the games ask you to remember, or little exceptions to rules. And in particular, games with action checklist, I find just a little bit overwhelming, especially if the actions are written on two sides of a reference card, you have half the actions of the game are face down on the table. You can't see them. That to me is a huge kind of user interface mistake right there. Those games I can find to be harder to get into the flow of because I'm constantly looking at this checklist and kind of flipping it over to find the corresponding action. I can't think of any specific examples for that, but I have seen a pattern with that type of game. Brian says, you play a lot of games. Have you recently discovered any new game mechanisms or themes that have inspired you? I would say it happens almost every game, Brian, really. A game I played very recently that I don't know if it'll be inspiring, but it is. I was really impressed by the mechanisms in it. Was the Guild of Merchant Explorers. It's a game where every turn a card is flipped and it says, okay, this is a land type that all players individually must put a token on that land type or multiple tokens on that land type. But over the course of the game, other special cards get shuffled in there, and those cards don't have a meaning by themselves. Rather, they are triggering your own individual benefit, an asymmetric benefit card that you have acquired during the game. And I just thought that was a really clever way of using this kind of simultaneous, here's a thing that everyone gets to use in their own way. Not all that dissimilar from Rolling Realms, where everyone has these dice they're using in their own way. But when that certain thing is triggered, that you have your own asymmetric ability. Very specific to that game. I could see it maybe applying to other games that use a similar mechanism, but it was just a really, really cool thing to experience, and I look forward to playing that again. I also just played Land versus Sea last night, and that was again, I don't know if there's a very specific thing that I'm taking away from it, but it was a really neat experience where one player is playing the land and one player is playing the sea, and every turn you're putting a tile down on the board that builds out either a land mass or a sea mass, but whichever mass you are trying to build, you are still putting down some of the other type of region as well. So every tile has land and sea on it. And I thought especially for kind of a two-player dueling game that does have the possibility of negative player interaction, I really liked the positive player interaction there because, like, I was playing land. If I put land on the board, maybe I was helping a landmass that I was working on, but simply by placing a tile, which you have to do every turn, I'm also adding sea to the board that is helping my opponent. So I thought that was pretty cool. Zhenwei says, do you think the heat and drought situation in China will affect upcoming productions? Probably, yeah. I mean, at this point, I've stopped expecting anything in production to be ready on any given timeline, because over the past year there have been blackouts in China, there drought and heat, and so I've kind of taken the philosophy of it's ready when it's ready. And even with shipping, like we had several shipments that we were expecting to receive in the middle of August, and they still haven't arrived yet. And it's a little frustrating in this case because I was hoping to have them ready for our September 10th anniversary celebration, and they're now arriving in the middle of September instead. But yeah, I've kind of just taken I've tried not to. This is one of the reasons why I've tried not to announce any specific dates in the future for when we'll be announcing or doing anything in particular, because those dates can easily change based on production and freight shipping and all the little things that can happen in between. So, yeah, I've tried to learn to be more patient. I'm not a particularly patient person, but I've tried to learn to be more patient about things like production and freight shipping in particular over the last couple of years. Austin says he loves all the Stonemaier and Scythe shirts. Where can we get some of these? This particular shirt is made by MeepleSource. MeepleSource makes a bunch of, we work with MeepleSource a little bit. We don't get a royalty from it, but we say that it's okay for them to make these types of shirts. And this is the Albion shirt from the Invaders from Afar expansion for Scythe. A few people are mentioning trips. Dominique and Kevin separately have some little gaming retreats or cabin retreats that they're going on. That sounds awesome. YXTan says, you mentioned about production moving towards being more eco-friendly. This is a topic I talked about in a big way last week. Does this mean your future games will feature no miniatures or other alternatives? Eco-friendly means to produce them. Yeah, I mentioned this kind of the end of my last question, that if we think if we have a game where miniatures add significant value to the experience, we are going to include them in the game. They are not going to be our first pick by any means, but if we think that they could add that value to a game, they'll be part of it. And I think one thing to consider here still is, while we are trying to reduce the amount of plastic in our games, and I think that is very, very important, I still think that there is an important difference between plastic that is immediately disposed, like shrink wrap. I think that's the biggest problem really that we face right now, versus plastic that, yes, it's going to be around for 100 years, but hopefully that plastic will be played and used in the game for a long time. Like miniatures. Miniatures are designed to be used and played with for a long time. So that's part of it. The other part of plastic, unfortunately, is where the plastic is sourced from, which is generally the types of natural resources like oil that cannot be renewed. So that is the other problem to plastics in general, no matter how they are used eventually or disposed of eventually. Ivan says, what do I think about ancient game mechanisms making a comeback in modern games? For example, I have an idea for an Egyptian-themed game with rolling sticks as a movement mechanism. I love it. I love the idea of kind of medium-weight Euro games that use one really cool mechanism. Like even bingo. Every now and then I think of how kind of silly of a game bingo is. It's pretty much pure luck, but there are games that use the bingo mechanism in really interesting ways. Forgetting the game right now, but there was a game that came out around 8 or 9 years ago. It has a Roman theme, I believe, that used bingo, and it was a lot of fun to play this game. So I like when games take a very simple, easy to understand mechanism and add layers to it to get it up to that medium weight, or even not necessarily always get up to that medium weight, but if they can, I'm happy to see that. In fact, I'm thinking for rolling realms. I can't think of a realm that we've done bingo with in a realm. I'm not sure if that. I guess we would need it to relate to a specific game. But there is that older game that uses bingo as a mechanism. Maybe we should try to put bingo in a promo realm for rolling realms at some point. Alex says, what shows are we watching at the moment? He says, The Sandman was our latest, and it's very good. We are finishing up Sandman now, The Sandman. I'm really, really enjoying it. I think we're 7 or 8 episodes. Last night, we took a break from it to watch the first episode of House of the Dragon, the new Game of Thrones show. And we'll also soon be finishing up the new season of American Ninja Warrior. I think there's one more final episode next week, and we haven't watched any of the final episodes of it, so we're going to wait till next week and then have 3 nights in a row where we watch the 3 final episodes. We love that show. Our lunchtime show right now, we just finished Only Murders in the Building, which is a great half-hour kind of mystery show on Hulu. And we are watching What We Do in the Shadows and Reservation Dogs as well. Those are the other 2 lunchtime shows that we're watching. Oh, Alex, my coworker jumped in here. He says Anno 1800 is so fantastic. It looks like it should be completely overwhelming, and then the flow ends up being so smooth. I totally agree with that, Alex. Yeah, um, yeah. I'd say the one daunting aspect of Anno 1800 is that there are a lot of things to look at the beginning of the game, but once you realize quickly that you don't need to look at all those things right away, you only need to focus on a few different things. That really helps. Setup for it is a bit of a beast, but I think there are some custom inserts that help organize those tiles a little bit better than maybe the original version of the game. Even second print, maybe the second edition of the game or second printing solve that problem. I'm not entirely sure about that. George says, any news about the Stonemaier anniversary surprises and the shipping status? So currently, George, I mentioned this very early on, so I'll mention this again. We have moved our September e-newsletter back to September 7th. So we've moved it, I keep saying back, we moved it forward a week to give us a little bit more time because it still looks like the products that we're revealing for our 10th anniversary month probably won't arrive until late in the second week of September at best, but it'll probably be right in the middle of September. So we didn't want you to place orders on our web store and then have to wait many weeks to actually get the shipping notices. So we bumped that e-newsletter back to September 7th. That's why I revealed this promo card today instead of, because it's going to be another 2 weeks before I reveal another promo card. Let's see if we can get it to focus. Focus. And so yeah, that'll be September 7th, and probably even a little bit earlier in the week in September 7th is when I'll start to reveal stuff, so that you know what you can think about ordering on actual September 7th. Yeah, but the only things that I haven't actually revealed anything specifically that we're going to say. I have revealed that we have. Yeah, I haven't revealed anything yet, George, but I think it'll happen. It'll start happening on September 5th in a champion update, and then that news I think will sprinkle out. You'll start to see it on our website on September 5th, and then September 7th is when you'll see it up on our web store. Adam says, with Target commissioning a simpler version of Spirit Island, do you think this is a trend we will be seeing more of in the future to draw people into the hobby? We saw this before, too, a couple years ago with Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, where, a simpler version, and arguably, I think, a better version of Gloomhaven. I think Jaws of the Lion is brilliant. Will be a trend, Adam. I think for maybe really top-tier games, maybe. We're going to see it for Terra Mystica soon. And I like the reason I'm conflicted here a little bit is because for example, I love Terra Mystica. I wouldn't say I'm as excited about a simpler version of Terra Mystica because I already know and love Terra Mystica. At the same time, like you said, I love games that make the gaming hobby more accessible to people. So if this new Terra Mystica invites more people into the hobby, and then they get into Terra Mystica as a result, or whether or not they get into Terra Mystica or other games, I think that's great. And so I think it is a trend we'll see continue to a certain extent for probably very popular games. I don't know if we'll see it happen for really any games that haven't already sold tons of copies and are very well received. That's my guess right now. Michael had a similar question about what's going to be on sale during the Stonemaier anniversary. I will say that there will be a store-wide sale for the Stonemaier Games anniversary. I haven't revealed the details of that yet, but starting in early September, or September 7th specifically, there will be a worldwide sale on the Stonemaier Games web stores. Yeah. What else? Let me see if there's any other topics that I haven't covered yet. A book I recently read was called Summer Frost. Actually, a really solid novella in Summer Frost. If you're looking for something set a little bit in the future, a little bit of sci-fi in it, or a lot of sci-fi, but not too deep. It still feels like our world. And Megan and I watched the movie Room this past weekend, and also the movie Luck, which was on Apple TV. Room is a slightly older movie. I'd read the book, and I was curious about the movie. Really great acting, really well done movie. Very tense at times, difficult to watch at times, but a really well done movie. And we had was this last Friday? Yeah, last Friday we had a staff lunch. So we've been doing this since we all work in different states now, and we all work from home. That every month or so we've been getting together on Zoom to hang out for a lunch period. I'm finding that we aren't actually eating very much food during this time. We're just kind of talking. And it's not a meeting. We're just kind of getting together as a staff and hanging out for an hour. And I've really enjoyed the camaraderie and getting to know our different staff members better, both our full-time staff members, Alan, Joe, and me, and then the other part-time members or key independent contractors, people that essentially work for us full-time but have made the choice to remain an independent contractor. So that's been a lot of fun. We did that staff lunch last week. I'm curious if any of you have done that, especially during the pandemic where you're working from home a lot more probably. Have you done hangouts, virtual hangouts with coworkers that are not work related? So not meetings, but just hanging out, having like a happy hour or a lunch or just a casual chat. I'm curious if anyone else is doing anything like that. I have one other question here that I'll ask in a second, but let me see what other questions you have. Rise of Augustus. Thank you, David. Rise of Augustus is the game that kind of has a bingo feel to it. Brian says there are so many new TV series coming up this fall, like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, the Game of Thrones show that just launched. Is there anyone that's on the top of your list? I'm excited about all three of those, honestly. Probably the Rings of Power is probably at the top of my list, just because we haven't seen new quality Lord of the Rings content for quite some time now, whereas we have seen quality Star Wars content, and Game of Thrones didn't end all that long ago. At least it feels that way. Maybe a few years ago, 3-4 years ago. So yeah, the Rings of Power is probably at the top of that list, but I'm excited about all three of those series. And also some smaller shows that are coming back in the near future as well. There was one that we just saw the other day. What was the other one that was coming back? There's I'm blanking on the show, but there's a smaller show that's coming back that I'm excited about too. But those big shows, definitely I'm very excited about. Brian says he also likes Only Murders in the Building. Genway said, I missed about the anniversary surprises. So I haven't actually revealed the anniversary surprises yet. I've just said that we kind of bumped the reveal back a little bit to September 7th and maybe a few days before that for Champions. George says, you haven't finished Better Call Saul yet. You will cry at the season finale for sure. So George, I ended up cheating a little bit for Better Call Saul. I haven't watched the last 4 seasons. And I kind of decided, as much as I want to watch them, I don't watch very much TV at all on my own. I only watch TV at lunch and dinner with Megan. And so it has to be a show that Megan really loves. And she wasn't interested in Better Call Saul. And so I decided recently when the finale happened to just kind of read about the finale and see what happened in the finale. And I was fascinated by it. It sounded like a really, really great finale of a show, of a series. And maybe a small part of me is regretting that I didn't watch the episodes before that. But I might go back and watch like some recaps of seasons, maybe season recaps of what happened during those seasons, because it just sounds like a really great way to wrap up the entire, not just Better Call Saul, but also the Breaking Bad brand. Yeah. I'm glad you watched it, though. It sounds like you really did enjoy it. Carol says that her house also took a Sandman break for House of the Dragons last night. Very similar to our house, Carol. Anton says, are there any good games about recycling? I don't know about recycling in particular. CO2 maybe. There's a game called CO2. And just this past week, Matt Leacock announced a new game. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but it's going to be on GameFound. If anyone can remember the new Matt Leacock game that is about sustainability. I think it's more about technology that is good for sustainability. And the description for it, it's on BackerKit, not GameFound. It's going to be on BackerKit. The description for it made it sound a little bit like Wingspan, but cooperative. So I don't know if he's just throwing Wingspan in there as a catchy word, but he did call it an engine builder, kind of like Wingspan. So I'm curious to see what he does with that. Maybe it's a car-driven engine builder. My coworker Alex says the team lunches have been great. Lunches in quotes, because we haven't been eating much food. He says it's harder to eat on a computer screen than in person, though. Yeah, I get that. We might, maybe in the future, we'll move it a little bit outside the lunch period, so we're not actually disrupting the lunch period for people who aren't eating. But at the same time, people are in different time zones now. Joe is in Reno, Christine is in Florida, and we have Dave over in the UK and Morton in Denmark. So it's even dinner time for them. So yeah, we might have to find some different times. Although we're trying to keep in mind how late it is in Denmark and the UK when we have these staff lunches. Nancy Jane says that she does something like that at her work as well. Brian says we held virtual happy hours early on in 2020, even including some games like Just One. These dropped off after a few months, but I found them fun. Yeah, and that's okay. I remember doing that in the pandemic too. Early on, we were just looking for ways to connect with each other, and yeah, I think those somehow look at back of those times with some the sweet part of the bittersweet memories of those times. That it was a good time to connect with people in ways that we hadn't connected in a long time. The Excel Gamer says, I know you watch a lot of shows on TV and streaming services. And yeah, we actually only have streaming services now. He says, I rarely watch TV or streaming shows, but I watch so much content on YouTube. I recently started watching something on YouTube called The Backrooms by Kane Pixels. Have you heard of this? Do you watch any content on YouTube? I have not heard of that, no, and I'd love to hear more about it. I do watch quite a bit on YouTube, but it's usually gaming related. YouTube is where I learn about video games, basically, because I don't play a lot of video games, but I want to learn from them. And I also watch a lot of gaming reviews and gaming discussions on YouTube as well. And a lot of disc golf. Quite a lot of disc golf. We watched the tournament this past weekend. Also, of course, we played disc golf this past weekend too. Kevin says that Ecos also has a bingo feel. Oh, that's cool. I haven't played Ecos, but I might have to try that to see how they incorporate the bingo feel to it. The Excel Gamer says that The Backrooms is a type of mundane horror. He says, I really hate scary stuff, but my curiosity got the better of me. Okay. Interesting. Did you end up liking it? As a fellow person who doesn't generally like horror or scary stuff, did you end up liking it anyway? Daybreak. Okay, thank you, Susanna. She says that Daybreak is the Matt Leacock game that Matt recently announced. And Genway says that Queen Games also has a new series of games based on green technology. This is great. Genway says, have I done or do you have plans for fans of Stonemaier games gathering at such a gaming retreat? I would say that the closest thing that we do kind of related to Stonemaier games is the Stonemaier Games Design Day, where it is based a little bit more, it's geared towards designers more, but there are also just playtesters that come in and just playtest the many different games that designers bring. But I would say that's the closest that I think we plan on getting to a kind of a fan event for Stonemaier games. If you ever just want to come and come to Design Day, as a fan, you can do that, but you can also come as a playtester or come as a designer. It is sold out this year. There's limited space at Pieces, but that's something to keep on your radar for the future. Make sure to sign up for a back-in-stock notification for that. Even if you know you can't attend this year, that back-in-stock notification will ensure that you hear about it next year and in future years. Anthony says that he played his first solo Tapestry game this Monday. Really nice. Thanks for giving that a try solo, Anthony. I appreciate that. Chad says he's a part of an art team that meets on video teams every month. He says there are people from around the world. Sometimes we have translators that join so we can all live chat. That's really cool. That's really, really cool. I'm trying to think of one of the things that I've been working on recently. I've had, I don't want to say a slower week, maybe a little bit of a slower week in terms of tasks here. Like I did my blog post on Monday. Mostly been working on I have a little bit more time for game design over the last couple of days, which is really nice. What else have I been doing? A lot of it's just regular kind of email maintenance and putting out little fires, that type of thing. Nothing I think is all that super interesting. Let me look at my calendar to see if I have any stories from the last couple of days. I do have a podcast today with Darian and Dan. I forget the name of their podcast though. I did sent out games for play and win conventions in the upcoming months. Any convention that has a play and win section there, and they fill out the public Google Doc that has information about play and win games. I send out those games once a month. And I filmed a bunch of videos yesterday. One of those videos was the continuation of A Brief History of Stonemaier Games. And then I filmed 5 videos about games. I think that's right. Yeah, 5 different videos about various games that I played recently. All of which I mentioned today. There was, let's see if I can find the list. The list was Guild of Merchant Explorers, Factory Funner, Star Trek Missions, Gudetama, and Jekyll versus Hyde. Yeah, all interesting games in their own right. I would say my favorites out of those games were the Guild of Merchant Explorers and Jekyll versus Hyde. Although Gudetama is one that I had kind of silly fun with and would gladly get back to the table again, especially for a little end of game night or beginning of game night filler. If you haven't seen the art for Gudetama, it's Gute. Gude. No, yeah. I'll just spell it out. Gudetama. There we go. Gudetama. It's a reference to an egg, and there's a really cute cartoon egg that you can see if you look at the art for this on Board Game Geek. Near says, besides Rolling Realms, what other games work well for virtual get-togethers at work? I did a video about this early in the pandemic. Let me see if I can find that list. Might be, I'll search under virtual to see if it shows up. Or remote, maybe. Virtual. No, it's not under virtual. I'll try remote. I know just one is one. People mentioned that. Okay, my top 10 favorite games to play remotely. I filmed this in March of 2020, early on in the pandemic. The list is from 10 to 1. So I included Jackbox on it, then Tiny Towns, Russian Railroads on Board Game Arena, I believe, Quacks of Quedlinburg, would be a little tough, but it is possible, Sagrada, Scotland Yard, Seven Wonders Duel, Ink and Gold, Deep Sea Adventure, and On Tour. Tried a lot of things back then to see what could work and what couldn't work. I think some of these work better than others. Like On Tour definitely works very, very well. Ink and Gold works very, very well. And Tiny Towns works remotely really, really well as well. Some of those other games require some interactions that make it a little bit more difficult. There's a YouTube channel called Long Distance Gamers that is really interesting because it's a group of friends that once lived together and then moved apart, far apart, and they have figured out some really creative ways to play games that you would not expect that you could play remotely, using multiple cameras and things like that. But it's really interesting to see what they've done to make that work. So if you're curious about that, check out Long Distance Gamers. It's a YouTube channel. Chad says, are there any publishers that you have found that make really great rulebooks? Any pet peeves that you have for rulebooks? Great question, Chad. Let's see if I have any pet peeves. Or publishers that make really great rulebooks. Consistently, I don't know, I'm looking at my shelf here. It's hard for me to picture the rule books in my mind as I think about that. I do remember one recent one that I thought was really clever was the Parks rulebook. I thought, oh, not the Parks, the Caper Europe rulebook from the people who make Parks was really, really good because it had the rules explained really nicely, but it also had nice visual examples. And at the bottom of each page, it had kind of a tip for better understanding the strategies that were discussed on that page. I thought that was great. Pet peeves that I have for rule books. What are some pet peeves? I mean, kind of general things that the font is, if they're trying to cram way too much information into the game with too small font and just massive pages of text. Like I honestly, for a game that I love, in fact, two games I love that come to mind. I mentioned this because I love these games. I love Concordia and I love Castles of Madkin Ludwig. And you can learn the rules from those rule books. They teach the game pretty well, but they cram a lot of text and small text into a small amount of space for the purposes, I think, partially of having a very short rule book. And I'm hoping, I recently saw that my shipment is in progress for the new Castles of Madkin Ludwig. I'm curious to see if they've updated the rule book to be a little bit better than that. Yeah, those are two things. Something that we're leaning towards doing more is having small rule books that take up less space so that they're easier to keep on the table, even if it means more pages in the rule book itself. This is something that I learned from the Cardboard Herald, which is a YouTube channel. He was mostly highlighting the rulebooks from Plaid Hat Games that do this. They have rulebooks that are, I believe, 240 by 165 millimeters that are really, it's the Libertalia size basically, that fit really well on the rulebook, on the table. Very easy to hold up with one or two hands, which you can't do with a giant floppy rulebook. And that still includes plenty of visuals and examples and well-explained rules in the rulebook. Yeah. The Excel Gamer says that he does like the back room. He says the person who created the series took an original creepypasta and turned it into his own iteration. Very interesting story, incredible videography, and sound design. It makes my skins crawl, but it's so good. Interesting. Maybe I'll have to try a little bit of that to see if it's for me. George recommends Railroads Inc. as well as a game that is very easily played remotely if you're playing with the actual tabletop version of the game. And Chandler says a bunch of roll and writes are good for this. He says, Brian played Cascadia 2-player over Zoom, which took some doing, but was worth it. That's awesome. Yeah. Cascadia, I think, would be a little difficult to play remotely, but I'm glad you made it work, Brian. Molly has a very positive shout out here for how amazing Joe is, my coworker Joe. She says he seems to be available and helpful 24/7 in just the Discord alone, which is awesome because Discord is still very new to us. He says, sometimes I catch a question, I can answer it, but when I go to respond, he is already typing a response already. That's awesome. Yeah, Joe has really been hugely beneficial, I think, to the community, but also to me in terms of answering questions. Just yesterday, like I try to answer questions a lot on our website when I see questions because I see them first. But even yesterday, I was kind of in the middle of a lot of stuff. I knew that I would have to dig deep to find an answer for something, and I forwarded it to Joe, and he took care of it right away, which was really, really helpful for him. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Molly. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you being available to answer questions too, just as a Stonemaier ambassador. That's really incredible and a really great gift to the community. Nancy Jane adds, welcome to as something that can be played well over Zoom. Totally, yeah, welcome to. She mentions, especially if you can provide PDFs or printouts of the player boards. And that's another thing that On Tour does really well. With On Tour, it's nice that if you have the full copy of the game, but I believe On Tour also lets you just print out one sheet map of the US to use for a remotely playable game. Near says, when the errata is longer than the rulebook. Yeah, we might have that for Charterstone. We have a long errata. Well, not errata. We have a long FAQ for Charterstone. Lots of little questions about Charterstone. The Excel Gamer says that Pencil First Game just came out with a nice game that can be played over the internet called Delicious. It's part of the Herbaceous and Floriferous title. Yeah, I haven't played Delicious yet, but now I'm curious about it. I am more intrigued now that I've had this great experience with Rolling Realms. I'm more intrigued than ever before about games that are either remotely playable or even playable not in real time, which I think is what's happening with Rolling Realms. I play a game and then anyone in the future can find the YouTube video and play against me at their own time. They can pause the video, they can watch it on their schedule. I think that's pretty cool. And George recommends the game Pan Am from Prospero Hall, which I haven't played yet, but that was recommended highly to me. I need to find that. Jen Way says, how can I join the Stonemaier Games Discord? Look on our e-newsletter. There's a link at the bottom of our e-newsletter to find the Stonemaier Games Discord channel, and that's where you find it. I haven't yet broadcasted on our website, namely because I kind of, as it's growing, I kind of want to focus it on people who follow our content at least somewhat closely, because it is a Discord channel for fans of Stonemaier games, not just anyone who shows up at our website for the first time. Not that we're excluding them, but we're trying to foster what feels like a fan community. People who are excited about our games, excited to talk about them, and other things. A lot of other conversations happen there. But that's why so far we've limited it to our e-newsletter. Greg has a nice shout out too. Yeah, feel free to shout out to my coworkers. I love hearing great things about my coworkers. Greg says, I'll add my own to Joe and Alex, who helped resolve an issue I had with a broken viticulture wine glass, which does happen. I'm sorry about that. We are definitely here to help replace them. Great communication from both of them, and I'm very satisfied for the ultimate resolution. Whatever that may be, I actually can't remember exactly what our policy is on those wine glasses, because there always is the risk that one will break in shipping. But I'm glad at least there was a good resolution that you were happy with, Greg. That's what's most important in the end. Yeah. Chad says, what did you think of Waystation? It's crazy that it was published in 1963. That was a 1963 book? I did not realize that, Chad. Yeah, I really enjoyed Waystation. It's a light science fiction novel about, without spoiling anything beyond the first chapter, it's about a man who has lived for a very long time and seems to have a reason, perhaps an external reason for having lived that long. And it's kind of a low-key book. Like, there's tension in it, but not a lot happens, and that's okay. It was a really, really entertaining read to read about this book, and I am blown away that it happened in 1963. It reminded me a lot of Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is a modern writer. She's currently writing, continues to write, and one of Becky's things that she does so well is she creates characters, and I don't want science fiction style characters that feel very unique, but also very well thought out. And Waystation, the author of Waystation, did that back in 1963, which is incredible to me. Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't realize it was that old. I think we've kind of reached the end of the questions. Oh no, I had one other question for you all, if you want to answer this real quick. So I want to do a blog post soon about customer service as it relates to brief conversation starters with customers. This was inspired a little bit by a video that Nicholas had a question earlier in this post. He sent me a video showcasing a guy from St. Louis who runs a store, a chain called Strange Donuts, a very small chain. And he was talking about connecting with customers over brief conversations, where you ask a question to the customer. And his question that he asks, he has this kind of 3-question method where he has his staff where he asks a customer, what are you up to today? Or what's going on for you today? That type of question, like, what are you up to today? And whatever the customer says, he follows it up with a question. And the key is that he is always genuinely curious about what he's asking about, and but at the same time, he's creating a real human connection with a customer. Because oftentimes, I think the problem he discusses in the channel in the video is that sometimes customers don't see employees of stores or anything as people. Really, they're there to get their donut, or they're there to buy a game, and they're not seeing the human behind it. And having that human connection is really important for both customer loyalty, but also for humanity, I think. And so I really like that idea of asking one or two questions that you're genuinely interested in, that are easy for the person to answer on the fly, and that don't inspire a yes or no answer. So I like that question. It's very specific in today. What are you doing today? What are you excited about today? And I'm curious if you have any questions like that you found work really well for introducing someone or welcoming someone into a very brief conversation. Not one that will go too long, but very brief. It's just on my mind recently, and if you have any thoughts about that, let me know in the comments below, whether it's here or on YouTube. I'll probably do a blog post on it in the near future, maybe even tomorrow. Also, while I was talking, there were some nice comments about Stonemaier Games employees, and I very much appreciate that. Near says, have I watched The Man from Earth? Have I watched that movie? He says it sounds a little bit like Waystation. I have not seen The Man from Earth. No, I have not seen that one. Chad says he just read The Man from Earth. He thought the movie came from the book, but turns out they are very different. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. Your questions, hopefully some great, well, not hopefully, but some great answers to the questions that I asked as well. Thank you for being here, and it's exciting to share this new bird card with you. I'll be back next Wednesday for another live cast, and then on September 7th for our big anniversary month reveal and discussion and sales and all sorts of surprises and things like that on September 7th. I'll see you then.